Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rocket Lasso Live. It is episode 6 of season 5. So, the last live stream, we were showing off all of the new 2023.2 stuff with Rick Barrett as our guest, but today is going to be a regular episode, so we should be able to tackle lots of questions. I got a pretty hard out today. I've got a meeting with Winbush and EJ about the upcoming tour that we're doing with Maxon, showing off a bunch of Cinema 4D stuff across the US and Europe. So looking forward to that. Got to do a little bit of figuring out of exactly what we're doing presentation wise. Start getting those questions together, everybody, on YouTube and on Twitch. If you want to post a link, you got to go over to Twitch because YouTube doesn't allow for links. But I like the typed out questions over there as well. So thanks for those starting to come in. We've got people on YouTube and Twitch already starting to ask some questions, which is great. I'm not 100% sure, but I think there probably won't be a live stream next week because I'm going to have to be wrapping up my presentation prep for my NAB presentation. But I thought, as a way of making it up a little bit, we can do a little preview of some of what it's going to be. So I'm going to switch over to the screen. So as you probably, well, for anybody who's hanging out there, a couple weeks ago, I got asked the standard folding paper question that we get pretty often. We actually had some significant progress where things were working well. So a lot of my presentation is going to be based on exploring the possibilities when it comes to like paper folding and like cloth and just like origami type things. So I think it's gonna be a really good presentation, and I'm gonna be right now I'm just in the exploring phase, seeing what's possible. But I made this morning, so here we are getting, and this is running in the viewport, so decent playback. But this is actually a napkin fold, and in my life I've folded this napkin like thousands of times. My first job was at a country club as a waiter, and we used to have to fold napkins all the time. So here's the 3D version of that. So you can see, like the napkin has to get flipped over, and like every, building these things step by step. But what's exciting, I'm not going to go over all the details here, but what's exciting is that you have to be a little meticulous with the way you build it, but it ends up being very forgiving, and you have a lot of artistic control. I love this movement. Look at how this folds upward and in, and then you end up with pretty much your final napkin shape. So you can see we got some lovely folds there. Like I've got the way the settings I currently have, it leaves it being kind of sloppy and a little bit wrinkled, but you can tweak the settings and make them actually be very sharp and precise. And then I've got a stack of modifiers that helps here where I can round that out a little bit. We can subdivide, we can add some thickness on there, and we can end up with like lovely folded cloth napkin. So very, very pleased with the direction all of that is going. Just for fun, I'm going to, what would I do? Probably just turn off the force here and hit play. So suddenly, yeah, now it's not trying to hold together at all. You see everything's just going to fall apart and essentially unfold. So yeah, that's one I was playing with this morning. I'm trying to figure out like the step through in the presentation of like, let's do an easy one and then do a fancier one. So here's a baked, this one is baked out as a lembic, but this was a fancier, more complicated version. And you'll see that we fold, flip around, and a little pinch for the beak. So we get a little bird. So very pleased with the way all this is coming together. It's proving to be very controllable and very forgiving. And you'll see here I again turned off the effect, so it like unwraps itself. But what's cool about that is I then time remapped my alembic with some keyframes. So now we start out with this like, I guess, kind of wrinkly sheet of paper. But if I hit play, you're gonna see instead of getting all the folds, we can kind of get this magical unwrapping where, and then it turns into a bird. So you couldn't just do a morph with that. Like you have to actually get there step by step by step. But if it continue, I guess I didn't keyframe those, but the ability to remap the time here and get kind of an organic version, but then also get the unfolding version as well. So yeah, just a question I've gotten for years and years and years, and now suddenly it's not only doable, but it is really fun to do as well. So I'm excited. It's gonna be a good presentation. So we won't be tackling any of that today because that's gonna be my presentation at NAB pretty much 2 weeks from today. But just wanted to do a little overview of, well, I'm just excited about it, so I was showing that off. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure about all the destinations, Eric, of the tour. The first one's going to be in Texas, which is actually not far away. I think it's only like 3.5 weeks away or something. So a lot to do in the upcoming time. So, yep, exactly. Perfect for table settings. This napkin, well, it goes to the possibilities get really exciting because, well, I guess there ends up being a lot of polygons on there. I guess you could remodel it carefully after the fact. The remesher doesn't like them. It's just a remesher is more built for like volumes and whatnot. So like all this folded cloth, it doesn't look good remeshed. But just creating a model of like, oh, here's a nice model of a folded piece of cloth, or even like that bird. Imagine taking the bird, you get it to that final bent state, looking really good, like just as a modeling technique essentially. Bake it down as a still, and then rig it up so you can actually like have it flying and flapping around and whatnot. So a lot of possibilities there. Honestly, I wasn't even thinking about it, but you could just, well, not just, but you could manually rig up. That would still be pretty dang difficult now that I think about it. But you could even rig up the thing with joints in its unfolded state and use the joints to do the folding. But that would be significantly more complicated depending on what it was. But yeah, anyway, it's a cool technique. I'm very excited about it. So let's start looking through the chat and seeing what we've got. Dean got in early with a question, which is a link to a still, and you said you weren't able to find the artist, but what is the specifics you were looking at? But in this white A, can we get the pin there? Can we get a noise displacement or material to bend along with curved geometry, like the A and the S? Let me reread that question. I guess here's the still in question. And you can see that we get these wrinkles, and the text presumably is stuck on it. Can we get a noise displacement or material to bend along with the curved geometry? Like in, oh, I think I'm looking at the, oh no, I think, yeah, the A and the S specifically, where you see it kind of bending up. I mean, that's, oh, it wasn't sharing the screen, sorry. So yeah, here's the image where you can see we got the letter A, the letter S, and it seems to be stuck on this wrinkly shape. Like, is that what you mean? Because, oh, or maybe you mean on the A and the S here. So you can see we've got this little texture projected and kind of wrapped on it. Now, we're not seeing it in motion. We're not seeing this in motion. So, you know, I don't know if there's any kind of fancy movement on there, because at a certain point it's just, you know, this is just a material applied properly, where, you know, potentially you'd be drawing a displacement in like Photoshop or body paint, or you would, I'm just trying to think if there's anything here then. But yeah, because it's pretty, seems like pretty straightforward displacement. All you have to do is paint a really nice displacement map. Now you're kind of saying using it as noise, but then you need each individual section as noise, which even, yeah, you wouldn't be able to get to follow the curvature easily. Yeah. Like, you've got options, but I'd say this is just a case of something having nice looking UVs, and then you just do whatever you want with those. If you wanted to do it a little bit more, let's make text, make a letter R, which will be a little bit tricky. What's that new? I downloaded a new font I liked the look of, and now I can't remember what it is. Let's grab something straightforward. Make a bold version of this, make it a little bit deeper. So It's a good opportunity to do a little bit of stuff with thickness where we could say that this is, well, almost the final of what we want. But let's grab the new thicken. We'll turn on advanced mode. I'm going to say I only want the, I think, outer shell. Yeah. So now we got the outer shell. I can say push inward. You can see I can actually shrink that down just a bit. So that is essentially what I want the text to look like. That's what I want the displacement to look like. Honestly, maybe even a little smaller. The in or out. Does thickness have a limit? Yeah, if we do start there, we can get a little bit more what I wanted. So you can do that, and then maybe, how would I get the outer shell of that? I'm trying to think of a procedural way of getting a particular shape I've got in my head. I could do it with slicer, which maybe is a good idea. If I were to take, yeah, it's a little silly, but you know, kind of emulating what they have in a procedural sort of way. If I duplicate that text, feed in another thicken, also turn that to advanced. That's behaving a little not what I was expecting. Let me hide that, turn this on. Yeah, that's acting like there's still an inside and outside. I feel. I'll put that into a connect. Interesting. I'm being a little too particular. Let's simplify. So we've got our original text, and let's say the original text is whatever thickness it is. Maybe that's a little too bold. No, I like the bold better. So then we make a thicken, and I'll make an instance of that text. And we'll drop that inside there. So this thicken should be able to, we want the start and the end. And let's reset these to basic. There we go. So that should be creating, what's a good way of showing this? I mean, essentially we need to see the wireframe. I don't even know the shortcut because I go to wireframe so infrequently. Let's go to lines, NG, NG being the shortcut. So you can see, let's even hide the original text. You can see that we've got an inside and an outside. So we could push that entirely to the outside to give us this outermost shell, which can work well, but then I'm going to feed that into a slicer, Rocket Lasso slicer, and say that actually I'd only like one slice, and we want that to be on Z+. So we get one cut, and as long as I position the slicer correctly, I'll hold down 7 as I drag my position. You can see I can get this nice cut, so we get this double thick wall, and that can then be fed into an extrude. And let's go back to regular geometry here. And that looks a little bit weird. Oh, maybe because we're crisscrossing right there. So our thicken, a little too thick, pull back. Yeah, there we go. That was happening because the extrude doesn't like when two lines crisscross each other. So just a little too thick. They're crisscrossing. There we go. So I get this lovely outline that can be pulled back to something reasonable. Grab our original text, and that comes in just kind of filling in the inside. So that becomes the detail that we actually want to add, that displacement effect. But so it does turn into, I don't think I'd even want to work from this original geometry. If you wanted to potentially fake it, which is not a bad idea in this circumstance, what I'm thinking is we hide that original text, and if we take the cylinder and just place it carefully right inside, sort of filling in that gap. And I'm going to be a little sloppy with this, but if we just did something as simple as that, you can now see that we've got this rounded section that's filling in that area. Actually, you know, would be even better is, let's not do that with a cylinder. Let's do it with a spline, which should also give us our orientation. So point mode, draw spline, and I'll say I want to start there and there. Hit escape, make a brand new line. I would like to start there. And like I said, I'm not going to be super precise here, but let's get all of the curvature. That seems like it would be relevant there. And then one final one that would pretty much terminate right there. Okay, so that hopefully is matching our line relatively well. So then that gets fed through a simple sweep inside. That will get a bunch of subdivisions, and T for scale, scale down until we're pretty much perfectly filling in that material. Let's pull that forward. Now we could terminate those lines, like this line, maybe that would look better if we terminate that a little bit earlier. So like if that's stopping at that halfway point. This one will probably also look better if it's not overshooting too far. That one might be good. So yeah, there you can see the text is terminating pretty well. This one, we probably need to bool that out for the direction that we're viewing it. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, let's push that further. So yeah, we got a couple gaps and whatnot. But the big thing I want to do is change this spline to be subdivided. We probably don't need any angles. I'll jump it up to 90, and we'll say it subdivides every, let's say, 1. Yeah, that's getting a little bit more there. And yeah, the curvature is causing these pinches. So that gives us plenty of geometry to work from. Might be nice if those were a little more uniform. Now we aren't subdivided, but it's still a Bezier line. So if we wanted those to be dead even, just to make things a little cleaner, I'll put it into one of my resamples. So say I'll resample that line and give me exactly a step of 1. And now you can see our point count is way more even. But you know, if you don't have utility splines, then you saw how easily you could, or you saw that we were getting a pretty good subdivision. So the good thing about having built it like this is we get the option of, we get nice UVs already applied to this thing. So first of all, let's give this a save. I didn't make an episode folder. Episode 6. There we go, scene files. So you get access to these scene files as soon as I can get them posted. I'm definitely behind on those. Letter displacement. Okay, so mostly we could just apply a material that would make it pretty visual. So making my renderer is default set to redshift. So I'll set to standard, make a standard material. And inside that material, it can even go into like the luminance channel. We'll feed a noise, and the important thing here is that the noise will be 2D. So we get a 2D noise applied. So now we mostly have to stretch the noise properly here. So let's say that's like 1,000, and I think 1,000, and then this one can be small. Well, I might have to guess. Nope, I got it right on the first try. So now you can see I get all these lovely random stripes that are essentially vertical, but they follow the curvature of the line, which is why we went through that entire exercise. So instead of having to make UVs, we're just sweeping it and getting the UVs kind of for free. Now, you can stretch these lines as much as you want or as little as you want. It looked like the one we saw had a little bit of randomness. So you can see by shrinking my X and Z that we can, the lines will transition a little bit from one side to the other. So this is entirely dependent on the resolution of our line. I can already guess that we're going to want to subdivide it more. We can tell this selection to like not show up by just typing in anything here. You just type in any gibberish and it's not going to show up. But we can still view that material. So I'm figuring, yeah, we can just put displacement here. So let's use a plane effector. So we put the plane effector, set the plane effector to a point deformation, and we want that to push out on Z. So it's going to inflate out, you see, just a little bit. Let's, I'm going to go up to 5, which is too much, but it'll make it visual for us. And then under our field, I want to limit it. I want to limit it via the shader field. And the shader field can now reference the luminance channel of what? Of that material. And instantly we can see that our stripes get applied. So now we have completely we can get this displacement by modifying any settings that we have. So I could say, hey, I want a step of 0.5. So now we've doubled the resolution vertically. Maybe we don't need quite so many subdivisions around. Drop that to 32. Yeah, that didn't really change the visual much at all. The entire resulting geometry, I'm going to say the cap, no start or end cap, get rid of those. And then, yeah, we could bool that out, which would, that would have to happen at this step. I'm not going to worry about booling it out, but obviously you know how to do that. We go to the front view here pretty easily. We can manipulate these points and make sure that the mesh is falling properly onto these points. So yeah, nice displacement there. This entire thing could be fed into a subdivision surface. Drop it to 1, should be plenty. NB, yeah, nice displacement there. We could scale down these individual points as much as we want. We could do a rail spline to make those scale down. Now, obviously, this isn't procedural as far as automatically adapting to the text, because if I change the font, I had to manually draw this. But when it comes down to it, like either you're gonna have to paint custom UVs to get everything mapped up perfectly, or you're gonna have to like draw the spline like I did. So it's kind of like one or the other, because you don't get them for free otherwise. So does that essentially cover the question? I'll check out some chat to find out, but that's what I know. Let's put that bool in there. Drag that to right about here. I'll do it pre-subdivision. That'll be a little quicker. Bool. A subtract B. There you can see. Chopped that right out. And then subdivide that result. Nice and rounded. Even like a little smoothing tag could round out some of these corners. And if you wanted a singular mesh, we could put the caps back on and feed this entire thing through a very high poly remesher. And then, potentially get a cleaned up version of it. Or do a little sculpting and get some blends in there. It all depends on what you want to do with it. Excellent. Well, Dean's happy with the answer there. So let me check the chat, see if there's anything else. Let's scroll. Something I've not been mentioning for a little bit, but if you look down, I think there might be a link in the description. But if you are on Twitch and you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you can actually subscribe to Rocket Lasso's Twitch for free, because you get a free one, so you could link your account, and it's a great way of supporting Rocket Lasso without it costing you anything extra. I'm going to jump to YouTube and check out that chat. Demi, simulation question: how would you make a long rolled carpet unroll down the stairs? I like that question. That's a cool question. I love those typed out questions. So, new file. How do I want to do this? I don't even know that it would be simulation. It could be simulation. Maybe it has to be simulation. Would we do alembic and run it backwards? A lot of this goes to the intent of what you want to do. I'm going to search for the word stairs inside the commander, and I'm going to pull up the Rocket Lasso stair primitive, which you should have access to if you've got the subscription. Make these solid stairs, and just super quick way of getting some nice default stairs. I'll say 0 step thickness, so we get the simplest possible stairs. Having said that, how would we, I'm assuming you just want like carpet that's, along the step, down, along the step, down. And if we want to roll that up, so you get a big coil up on the top, and that will roll down. Now, if you just roll down a carpet from the stairs, you're going to get, it's going to be pretty much like, from the side view, it's going to pretty much just bridge each peak, and maybe it'll sag down a little bit, but it's definitely not going to get down into those corners. So if we are doing it with a simulation, we could make the final stairs and then try and roll them up so we end up with a nice result, and then we could run the alembic backwards. I'm kind of feeling like that might be our best approach, because everything else would be I could make a duplicate of these stairs, make it editable, select these. And then you could imagine that using this geometry, it's like, oh, we could roll the carpet down and then have an invisible thing like this, kind of squish them into their corner and force them in between. But you know, that's not gonna be super pretty. Potentially, you can make it a little bit better, like if we bent them. So I'm gonna do this kind of sloppy version of it, but imagine, what do I want to do here? Oh, I was like, why is there volume? But I put on the wrong set of steps. So we can go -90, pull this positive, maintain the Y length. So I could, you know, we could have the bend like kind of animate through. Like I said, I'll do it sloppy here, but you can see I could kind of push in the bottom one, the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. So we could step through them that way with collision, but I think it's gonna be stretching the carpet a lot. So I don't want to do that. So actually I'll keep this set of stairs here because this will be a fine place for us to begin. Let's Shift C, PSR, reset mark transform, and I'd like to subdivide this a bunch. Let's select all, UB, deselect the center, and now I can hit MF, subdivide 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. If we want to be even, and if you're doing simulation stuff, it's not a bad idea to be pretty precise. So that makes it so I have to be a little more manual here. But, and yeah, heck, I'll just do it manual. Or maybe let's be less manual. Let's deselect all of those on one side and just convert that to an edge. Shift C, edge, edge to spline. Now I've got a spline that's making those. Don't think I need that anymore. This, if we hide these, now I've got that set of stairs, but what's good is I can feed that into an extrude. Now we get some geometry. Let's change the color so we can see it. Set that to red, make it darker. Stairs. Okay, cool. So now, could do extrusion. I could just, I'm just gonna eyeball it. Let's just manually move this up a little bit, over a little bit, just eyeballing it. It's fine. So we drag this across. I really wish the extrude had an easy way. I know we can use a modifier, and actually maybe I'll do that. No, but actually I will do that. So let's grab an axis, geometry axis, and drop that as a child after the fact. And I'll say that I want to, I guess, it's centering all of them. Yeah, so now you can see it has made it be centered based on where my axis is, and I can just scoot that over a little bit. So it's just a way of centering it. Now if I grab my extrude, I can extrude it, and it's going to extrude it in both directions. So it's a great, that's a great modifier. Give this a quick save. Okay. Anyway, I did a bunch of that, so we didn't have to do a bunch of manual selections, and it keeps it a little bit more procedural because now we can set this to be subdivided, and now we get nice even subdivisions where you see there's more of them here instead of there, and my other subdivision method was going to have it not be an even polygon count. So we can keep on decreasing that. I think that's probably pretty good there. Yeah, there's not going to be too many points and polygons. The extrude should probably have a couple of subdivisions. I don't think we have to go overboard, but something like that. So if we do that, what do we need to do for our simulation? I didn't think this far ahead because we need to pin those. We need to belt them or connect them to a solid piece of geometry. I wonder if we can do the pin trick. I don't think the pin trick is a good idea. I don't want to make it editable, but we might need to. So these stairs are going to be a collider eventually. We might need to subdivide it a few times to make it really clean. And let's just make these cloth for now. We're in real world scale here. So simulation wise, with some tests I've been doing lately, it feels like shrinking your scene scale makes things not pass through each other quite as much. And our point count isn't insane. So I'm going to instantly jump our sub steps up to 50 and hitting play. Hopefully we can see, actually that's pretty good. So it's just falling straight down the stairs. You know, as a generic look, that's kind of nice where those are flowing down pretty well. Cloth wise, we probably want it to be not stretchy, but decently bendy. That way, like these hard edges will be able to get smoothed out. We could increase the friction, which might stop them from sliding down the stairs. Well, it starts to, and then this one starts dragging it down, but I'm completely fine with that. Actually, we are going to need those not to fall down, so I guess we do need to think about this a little bit. What is actually happening? Yeah, those pull down, and there's just enough friction that those, it starts a cascading effect. Well, we could just try cranking up our friction some more. I imagine there's going to be, yeah, okay, there we go. Enough friction there, and you can see these will still flop down a bit, but that's working just fine. You know, potentially we could decrease our target length a little bit to compensate for the way those are sagging down. Yeah, that worked pretty well. Like just 2%, just a little bit smaller, it keeps these a little bit sharper. So that's our final, or just our basic hanging cloth. So now I want to connect this bottom one to essentially a cylinder, even if it's a tiny cylinder. So let's see if we can get the basic concept going. Yep. Now, T for scale. Let's match our subdivisions. I don't know if that's important or not, but you know, there's points for those to get close to. Now, the unfortunate thing, and I don't know if there's a technical limitation on this, but I don't think that they made it so that there's a procedural way to... What I want to do is tell this to be a collider. Yeah, that to be a collider. It's just something I can move around. It's, you know, fully rigid. But I want to I want to use the automatic connection here and say, hey, connect to other objects. Let's do an update live in a certain radius. But you see, it doesn't, the cloth doesn't acknowledge these colliders, these static objects as options to connect to, which is unfortunate. Like, I'd really like if it could do that automatically. Now, there's other methods, but not ones that, or the other methods make us make this editable, which is totally an option. Like, we make a duplicate of that, turn this off, and make this editable. I guess I'll fully bake it down, so connect, don't weld, make it editable. So we don't need that. So the simulation should still be working. Hit play. Yeah, same thing. It's happening. Now we need to belt. I don't do this too often. Simulation. Cloth belt. Belt onto this cylinder, which might also need to be made editable. Because if I hit set, I don't see any connections. So let's try making our cylinder editable. Let's try setting again. Again, it's not seeing it, but we might, I'm gonna hit undo because we might not need that to be editable, but what I might need to do is select our points here. Boom, boom. So now if I say set, no, it's still not. Oh, well now I might need to make it editable. Again, set, not doing anything. Make that editable. Set. Now there is a connection. So that is now connecting those points manually to here. Not difficult to do, but you have to make it editable. So that's what I was avoiding. Okay, so that should now be connected. Hit play. That's fine. So I'm thinking, let's try and make this relatively easy on ourselves and just draw a spline. Side view. NB. Okay, so got this lovely side view. What motion do we want this to take? Spline. Let's have it begin there. Oop, don't select that object, please. I might need to move the first point. If I click on something, it's going to acknowledge it being clicked. So I'll just slightly miss. Have it go. Well, we'll be able to edit this as we go. So let's. Essentially do that. Although, well, yeah. Now that I think about some of the motion I would like to get out of here, what I'd kind of like to do is get a carpet that actually goes like thump, 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 falling onto each of those steps. But again, that's not realistic. And if we're using a simulation, it needs to sort of be realistic. Anyway, basic version of this is, let's move that point to about the center there. And now grab that cylinder, call that the roll, call this the carpet, right click, animation, align to spline. Although that's our spline. Why did that line shoot out there? Because I put it on the carpet. Whoops. Roll, please. Align to spline. Bink. Okay, so that should be connected. Now if I grab this, we should see that travel up through. That's just fine. We're going to need a decent number of keyframes here. Let's go up to 200. So at the time of, let's make this linear to begin with. Animation, linear. Position, keyframe, all the way at 200. 200, or yeah, 100%. So let's just look at what happens here, because there's no rolling happening yet, but this will move out, and then it'll move up, and then it'll move over. Bump, 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 bump. Yeah, well, pretty much working as I was hoping it would. This spline should be set to be uniform. That way this will actually travel at a constant rate. And then the main thing we need to do is get the proper thickness on the carpet and the proper amount of rolling on our object. I'm trying to think if there's a nice, easy way of doing it. I guess the easiest way, we will do it with keyframes. We'll tell that is not tangential. So we can rotate this just a little bit there. Okay, it's P that we're trying to rotate on. So let's keyframe there. Go all the way to the end. And I think we want to be spinning this orientation. So let's just do, it's negative. So I'll say negative 360 keyframe. But I'll scoot that back a bit to like frame 30. And I have no idea if that's going to be any good. But we can now go to our track. And I really wish that would expand bigger. Like, I like it being docked there, but if it's not going to jump up far enough for you to be able to select something, I don't know the point. After the selecting the entire track, we can now say after that happens, I would like it to continue, I think. And it'll just continue forever. It'll just keep spinning. We could stop it at a certain point, but that's going to make it easy for us to select a single keyframe and change our speed. Hide that. And let's see, it's probably way too fast right now. Oh, I moved the spin and, did I have the tag selected? The roll. Yeah, mixed. Okay, so I grabbed the tag and the original object. That's my bad. The roll has an align to spline, and that should still be up at 200. Okay. Okay, now it's spinning. Actually, it's not nearly. It's actually pretty close to what I want. So yeah, that's actually doing a pretty good job of rolling this up. The thickness is working better than I thought it would, actually. That's almost, I was going to say we were going to have to really dial in the thickness, but thickness is pretty good. So yeah, that's not too bad. We need it to be a little bit faster. So what's nice here is because I set that to loop, all we have to do is grab this and move it back a couple of keyframes, which will be the equivalent of speeding the entire thing up. So there's more rolling going on. Closer. Still falling behind. Really close. As more points are colliding directly with other points, the entire thing is going to bog down a little bit. I'm going to go what I think is too far. But yeah, as more of these points are colliding with each other, in general, it's just going to do more slowdown. That happened with soft bodies as well, like the more collisions that were happening. Yeah, now I'm too quick where you see it's actually pulling it in. Actually, I'm kind of surprised. Look at that, the way the gravities and the friction is currently set up. As it yanks it too much initially. But look, they actually reform on the steps really well. I wonder if just rolling down the steps would have done, like we're doing this whole kind of reverse thing, but I wonder if just rolling down the steps would have worked fine. Potentially we can, follow up a little bit and see if we can get just rolling it down the steps working. Still a little bit too quick. Looks like too quick is way worse than too fast. And it might change over time. In fact, I pretty much guarantee it would change over time. So maybe we don't want it starting quite that early. So I could probably move that forward like 2 frames. There we go. So yeah, it's a little bit of sagging there, but that could work. So anyway, you can see the concept of there, like as far as rolling this up and maintaining the shape of the step, like that's pretty good. I don't even know how much further I'd want to go with that. And now I'm way more interested in the idea of unrolling it and seeing if that could just work. Like, let's just roll it for real and see if we can get anything working from it. Yeah, putting an extra keyframe in there to like speed up the roll, but that's pretty good. I don't see any need to like finish that concept. So instead, let's just try. I think it's going to be pretty ugly, but let's just see what we end up with. So we can get rid of the roll. Stairs are still a collider. This cloth just goes away. And we want a cylinder. So it's like the cardboard tube in the center of the carpet. And around said tube is going to be a helix with a proper orientation, with a radius that matches height of 0. View this from the side. Start radius. End radius. Yep. I don't know how many times we need to spiral. Say times 6. That feels pretty good. So you can see we've got that spline is stopping right around where we want it to. That again, I think a similar process. We shall extrude that. Let's grab another axis and center that. The subdivision, I'll say uniform 2. We could say none here because we can just type in whatever exact number of points that we want. So I could say like 1,000 points, and you can see we get a nice even 1,000 points along. And again, I think a couple of subdivisions along the length is a good idea, even if we don't do too many. So I wonder if we even have to connect it to the cardboard tube. Originally, I was thinking we would have to, but that actually might not be necessary. So go easy on the cardboard tube. The thickness we saw before by default was actually pretty good. So if we make this I guess it needs to be cloth. That will be cloth. And it needs to be not bendy. And it needs to have a whole bunch of these internal structure things going on so it can't collapse. So I'm going to say that the spread is really big and you can get a whole bunch of connections going. So hopefully that can let that maintain some structure. I don't know if it will. Make the carpet red again, just make it stand out. That becomes cloth. And we want it to be pretty bendy. 55 is a good number. And we want, I'm going to do 10 friction, so even double what we had before. Right now, actually, I don't mind the idea of that flap falling behind the set of stairs as a way of kind of like hooking in that particular spot. So let's just grab both of those. Move this. We probably need it to be far enough forward so that the gravity naturally wants it to start rolling forward. And that flap maybe will work, maybe not. Honestly, I think that's all we need to do. I'll save this as the next version. No, I can't really think of anything. Stickiness might be... No, we can't do stickiness because it'll stick to itself. But let's hit play and just see what we get. So... Interesting. I mean, it seems to be passing through the geometry a bit, but it is starting to roll down. The tube's not collapsing down, which is good. So, the tube... what do I want to do here? I have found... I don't understand the thickness. Like, if we crank the thickness up to 5, you would think that this whole thing would kind of explode outward. But I don't think it will. Yeah, like thickness it feels like there's some sort of like internal minimum that is made, or I can't stop these from being thicker. But in any case, simulation, we already jumped out the 50. Now that we're just brute force dropping this, getting some more collision passes could be good. So you can see the thickness that it wants to be, but I can't force that to be more than it currently is. But we can go back to the helix and shrink our radius, tighten that up a bit so it's maybe more, it's naturally at the scale that it wants to be. I'm just eyeballing it, so who knows. Scoot it forward a little bit more. I wonder how much of that is just the overall weight of the tube. Temporarily I turn off the tube, and how much is this forcing itself through? It's kind of splitting the difference. It's definitely not as bad, but it's definitely still squishing through. It's not exploding, so I think it's still not quite tight enough. I guess I'll go until it's too much. Unless that minimum I'm talking about, I wonder if that minimum I was just talking about is happening here as well. Like, it's detecting the length of each of these, and therefore my thickness is being modified. I think there's some internal calculation, which I wish there wasn't. So... if we start decreasing our point count, I wonder if it'll suddenly start becoming thicker. Yeah, it felt like it actually inflated outward a little bit because they might have been closer to colliding. Yeah, it kind of felt like they're expanding a little bit. And yeah, we probably didn't need quite that many subdivisions. Yeah, you suddenly, yeah, now you see it's actually inflating. So there is some sort of like minimum length that's setting the thickness. So keep that in mind. If you have a model that maybe has like some really close together points, maybe that's stopping your thickness from behaving the way you want it to. Okay, so now obviously it's passing through here, which is not something we want it to do. Also, the thickness now is probably too much. 3? No, see that minimum was going to be doing a lot. Yeah, see now 1, it's not going to look terribly different, but it's not exploding. So, oh yeah, it's passing through these stairs. We need better collisions. We might just need to subdivide the stairs. So, I'm going to search for a subdivide. Subdivide geometry modifier, put that in, and we can say it's based on polygons. I can subdivide once, twice. You know, the simulation stuff likes extra subdivisions. That is happening on the base geometry, which means the collider is seeing the result of it. So if I hit play, let's just see if it's passing through more or less. Is it better? Is it worse? Is it not different? I feel like it is going through less. Hard to tell. Currently it's only colliding with the front. It's got decent friction. I'll try adding a couple more. I know we have a lot of extra redundant geometry going on. But I just, yeah, see, look, just by changing subdivisions, that definitely worked better. A bevel on this step could probably go a long way. Squish. So, what more can we do here? That, I mean, if it starts rolling, but you see it's just kind of squishy right now. There's not much structure to it. I don't know. Well, let's put the tube back in. Just see what happens. I mean, that is maintaining the structure more, which in theory is going to make it want to roll more. The friction, maybe we'll start counting there. Okay, so more friction, especially maybe not, you know, maybe we don't want as much friction on the object, but let's crank up the friction on the stairs. So now there should be lots of friction on that. And then when it comes to like the amount that this is passing through and squishing, the only options that we really have are, I think, increasing our subdivisions here and cranking up our overall settings. So let's do that. We'll just try throwing an extra couple subdivisions in there, just see how much that helps or doesn't. I'm going to say that the friction on that object is back to default and that the stairs have like really high friction. So that way the friction cloth to cloth isn't that strong. Because I think this might be sliding a little bit and it's pulling that one. It's still not sticking that much. We could do the same trick with some stickiness, but I don't want to resort to that. Not terrible. We've almost got, I mean, there's a lot going on here. Maybe for our own sanity, I'll decrease the point count a little bit more. But, well, let's just hit play on that, which I don't think will be super different. But just make sure that didn't blatantly break anything, which I don't think it did. And then, as a proof of concept, let's get rid of all the subdivisions horizontally and just see, interesting. Like, very different behavior without those horizontal subdivisions. So, like, the way these are all stacked up, definitely something different. And then, what I really want to do is add extra ones. So if we make that a little bit more even across, what sort of behavior changes? Because I don't know. Obviously, a lot more geometry. Ooh, and those are passing through significantly more, like really harshly. Let's see if they do again. Ooh, yeah, that's rough. We could turn gravity down. This tube might be heavy. So I'm going to drop its mass down to 0.01, which hopefully doesn't mean it can be easily squished by the heavier carpet, but maybe. A bit, still maintaining structure. And actually, yeah, that did not pass through nearly as much. So I think there's a lot of weight in like that cardboard tube. Our carpet is still rolling, or is still traveling with us quite a bit. Let me check the chat, see if anybody has any thoughts. Yeah, Zalam was talking about there needed to be more subdivisions, but I'm pretty sure you were probably mentioning that a little bit ago. I'll add even a couple more, because it seems like every time we added more, it was looking a little bit better. Does the stairs? I know we built it, but I don't remember if there's... I don't think that there's a depth subdivision, because we're just trying to make the cleanest geometry possible. Yeah, better collisions right away. It's more accurate. It's presumably a little bit slower. It just stops right away. There's no initial force or anything we can do. I'd love there to be the old school initial force stuff. Yeah, we could just put like a basic wind. That might not be a bad idea. Simulate force wind. The wind will blow down the stairs, and we'll make it 55, which is like the minimum to kind of properly see something. And then I'm going to say that the carpet force will only include things I put in. So now this is essentially a wind only blowing on the cardboard tube. So is that going to be a little bit of force to want everything to want to roll forward? The mass is relatively light, but let's just see. Let's get a baseline from here. I feel like it is rolling more than it did, but maybe it's enough. When we're getting 2 frames a second back because we keep on subdividing, you know, we can't trust the speed at all. We could pin those first bits of we could pin these just because I've got the geometry there already. Yeah, if I say simulation connector, connect to other objects, exclude the, interesting. Do I have to drag in made editable objects? Yeah, it might be fine for a test anyway. If I say pin to other objects, yeah, those can now make a couple connections over there, but we don't want it to be so far. Yeah, it is point to point. So many little extra details. I need to make that small enough so every connection, yeah, is just from this outer one. So that's enough connections where it should want to stay. And now hopefully that one will fall and just kind of keep the cloth in that position. Let's see what happens. Boing, boing. No, well, it's I guess that one I can make heavier. Hurt. Oh yeah, and forces include none. Wind, double the strength. Let's just see what happens. Okay, that might be too strong because now it no, maybe it's not too strong. But yeah, well, I mean, it's exactly what we were talking about. It's going to be taut. And it stopped again. Yeah, I thought this might work. I didn't think we'd be fighting it quite as much as we are. I thought we'd get a better roll. I really thought that wind was too strong. But it is not strong enough. Because here's what's throwing me off is see how it feels like it's sliding more than it's rolling? But, you know, there's a decent amount of friction. Ba-dump. Yeah, it falls nicely and then just kind of dissipates all of its energy. So there's not, it doesn't feel like it's carrying through the rotational energy. And I'm not sure what to make of that. Rob, I mean, we can add mass per object. I mean, yeah, you saw me doing it there. We can say that the mass is heavier on one thing or another. So yeah, that option is here. But yeah, I'm thrown off by this. It does a really nice job of rolling off, but then it stops. It's like all of the rotational energy is drained out by it squishing into the ground is the way it feels to me. I think we could make the overall friction heavier because it's definitely twisting. I mean, it's coherent. It's not like exploding or passing through itself. And it is unrolling enough that you can see this feel like it's unrolling. But, you know, I just want to bump, 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 bump as it goes down. What else do we need? No stretchiness, no bounciness. We don't want any structure on the carpet. Bendy. We can say it's even more bendy. We don't want any stretch. Friction goes up. Thickness is fine. Target length, I think, is fine. The mass, we could try making it lighter. I don't think it ends up being kind of a relative thing. I don't think that changes much. I don't think it's going to like squish into itself less, but let's try making it a tenth the weight, which might mean that the wind is going to behave like stronger. Our Our second tube is really getting pulled along. If I didn't know better, I'd say the wind was affecting it, but yeah, we said include nothing. Calm down, second tube. Why are you traveling with us this time? I'm going to move on to the next question soon. So feel free to post one if you've got one. Wow, that is... Why is that so aggressively pulling? I mean, is the... The main thing that I would think would be having an effect here is I added more friction onto this overall. Okay, it did calm down this time, but the amount that was pulling was surprising. Yeah, this really feels like it's... Come on, roll. It still stops. It's still dissipating that energy. I'm assuming from the roll. And we're getting the same, like it's turning crooked again. I'm not sure why it would be turning to go so crooked. I mean, it's still pretty crazy that this is running at all, but I feel like I'd have to, you know, we might need to crank up our collisions even higher and our substeps even higher, and that's not going to be any good for a live stream. But I feel like that's the territory we're starting to get into here. And, you know, maybe the going in reverse technique, which we got far enough that hopefully the original questioner would see what it is. Way earlier on, Zach was asking about adding stickiness. And as I mentioned, that's potentially an option. But you have to remember sticky things stick to themselves. But you do have the option of making the carpet just a little bit sticky and then making the stairs very sticky. And if the stairs are very sticky, then, you know, you could still kind of get the effect you're going for. But yeah, this is not, especially with it not rolling, it means it's really pulling this thing taut. The way it's unrolling is, I mean, I could see, like, this feels more like a streamer. Like a streamer would unroll like this if things went badly for you. So yeah, not sure what to make of it. It's a coherent simulation, but it's not what we were trying to get. But that might be something to come back to at a future date. But that's as far as I think we can attempt to go right now. Friction vertex map. Tobias, I don't understand. Initial speed, yeah, that would be good, but friction with a vertex map, we could apply friction in some spots and not others, but that wasn't, you know, that wasn't the problem there. We just need overall friction everywhere. Justin has a question about an imploding planet. Oh, okay, this is fine. Let me make sure that's muted. So this is from freaking Star Trek. The first J.J. Abrams Star Trek, which when I saw it in the early days, I liked, but the more time has gone on, the more I'm not a huge fan of J.J. Abrams. I mean, this ends up being, because it's a planet, but it's so zoomed out that this all just starts feeling like dust. So... But it is a very, very fine-grained dust. So, you know, the only thought that comes to my mind would be pyro. But pyro is not going to look kind of solid, which this looks solid until it's not. I mean, I guess we could transition the two. But when you just look at any of the fine-grained detail here, which is a gift, so we're not getting a ton of fine-grained detail. But, you know, if you imagine that, like... If I have just a couple of letters filled with a volume of smoke, it's going to be not running in real time for the stream. So trying to get something that's got like this depth of resolution. And the resolution can't come from us feeding noise through it. It'd have to come from the actual pyro. I mean, along those lines, we can do a quick demo of some of the pyro. And let's just see if we can get... I'm just going to aim for like a small vortex effectively, or just like a small pit of smoke falling through. So my thought is, how do I want to do it? Essentially, it'd be a flat plane of smoke and then a downward, possibly central attraction. How do I want to do it? I mean, we could possibly use my swirl deformer a little bit. So yeah, okay, there's a couple little things we can try. So this can be a surface for us to be generating it. Now, if we bring in, if you haven't seen it, we've got the Rocket Lasso made swirl deformer. And the swirl's got more options just doing a regular swirl. So if I drop in the swirl, you get this cool swirl. But let's say we don't want any swirl, so we can drop that down to 0. And I can say I want 0 ridge height. But then we still have our height. So I can start putting a negative height in here. And you see I get this really nice like bulging effect. So we've got a couple options there. We could pull that negative and then control it via the radius. So we could like expand this out like that and you get sort of a collapsing effect. So that's sort of what I'm thinking. So let's assume we've got 5 frames to settle down, keyframe that, and then over the course of 90 frames, we'll increase this to about there. We can go to the advanced tab and change a lot of like the fall offs. The height will be relevant here. Oh yeah, that's inner radius, which will probably be 0. Yeah, that's fine. So we get that as essentially a ground plane. Separately, let's make a plane, and this will be hanging out up here. That's going to be a pyro emitter. We're going to be doing some crazy simulation stuff, so we definitely need to save early, just because it's going to be a strain on my machine while live streaming. Pyro smoke. So, right-clicking, simulation, pyro emitter. This will be a colliding ground plane, so I'll set that to be a collider. That should be fine. That should hopefully be able to collide with the surface. This emitter, we have to say it is a surface emitter. That way it's actually emitting everywhere on it. Shrink that down. I don't think the polygon count super matters here. Drop it down a bit. That's not going to be visible. This ground plane will be, and if I hit play right now, it's going to be like a giant cluster of fire, which, I'll hit play. We should be able to see, yeah, poof, a bunch of fire, which is cool. But I don't want fire, I just want the smoke. So, pretty easy. We'll say temperatures, none, no temperature. So now we're just emitting smoke, also known as density. So if I hit play, then we're going to get a big cloud of smoke. Smoke, by default, I think has a positive. Yeah, smoke is going to naturally want to rise. So we need to fix that. You get that via your pyro output, pyro scene, twirl this down. So, I'll go to pyro. So we've got a important setting here. Here's our density buoyancy, and gravity, of course, is going down. So this is the opposite of down, which would go slightly up. I want it to go significantly up, so I'm gonna say 50. So if I play, hopefully the smoke wants to pretty rapidly fall. Couple things to keep in mind. This is constantly emitting new smoke. So we probably want to not do that. We got a couple options. We could keyframe our density. We could say there is no density and there's just fuel. But there we have to keyframe the fuel as well. So let's just keyframe our density. So I'm going to say density add. So we'll add up until frame 5. And then say 0. So we'll get some density. Let's see what happens. Hit play. It's running reasonably well. We get a bit of density, and it's fading away relatively quickly. So we go into we go back into our pyro output. We scroll down until we get to our dissipation. I'm going to say 0 density dissipation and 0 absolute density dissipation. So now hopefully that won't fade away. It will fade away because it drifts apart from itself, but it won't fade away because it's naturally losing energy. They will fall out the sides, but I just want to see if we can get, yeah, are we seeing this fall through the pit at all? So let's visually, actually we'll add in a render, display, use lines so we can get the subdivision. Actually, the smoke is falling through there pretty quickly. It's not all of it, but you can definitely see that it's as rapidly as it can because of that heavy density. It is pulling it down. Back to our global settings, we've got things like we can make the speed up a little bit. Typically, our tree settings, the padding can go down to 1, and anything escaping out the sides we don't need. So we can also use another new thing that was just added. So under forces, we can create a destructor, T for scale, scale that out until we're pretty much at the edges. And I'm going to say select it, invert for pyro. Doesn't need to be as tall. Pull it down. So any pyro that gets out from here, it will delete. And when it deletes it, it will, keep our simulation running, well, potentially even quicker. So that is falling down with our vortex pretty well. We're not seeing it so much up here. So what options do we have? Well, that's a collider. I'm not sure if a collider passing through an object is going to, I could see it escaping. But let's let that run a little bit and just see what happens. Like, do we actually see that smoke fall away? It really doesn't. I might get rid of, let's get rid of a couple of additional forces inside of our pyro output. The buoyancy, that's just gravity, should be pulling it down. Let's get rid of all the vorticity. And then we've also got turbulence. We'll get rid of turbulence. So there's a lot less forces acting upon everything. So hopefully we can see the effect a little bit more clearly. And we definitely are. Like there's these forces were like, I'm not super clear on vorticity, but I think it's kind of like if a bunch of smoke is traveling left, it's going to pull smoke near it and try and pull it left as well. And then the turbulence is just trying to make, puffy clouds traveling everywhere. So our density traveling through looks kind of interesting. We can definitely see it cratering here. That definitely feels like it's pulling down. Although you can see we're actually getting this poof pushing up, which maybe makes sense. Like as that smoke fell down, it filled the volume. Suddenly it's trying to like splash upward. So there might be more to this than I was originally thinking. But we have additional options that we haven't even started getting to. One is let's really crank the density buoyancy down. So like right now it's really going to want to push downward. I'm not sure the ramifications of it, but let's just see what happens. I feel like it's filling this volume up like shockingly fast. And there could just be a lot of density. Maybe density doesn't want to be that dense. So with our keyframed density, it was emitting 10. Yeah. So let's say it's going from 1 density for 5 frames. So it's a thinner cloud. There's just not that much density. So now as that gets pulled down, do we actually start getting a void? I mean, yeah, it craters down. But then we get that puff that definitely feels like it's coming up. So additional options, we've got this collider. If I duplicate that and just move it up in the air a little bit, can we trap it in between those two and that will force it downward? Yes. Well, it just seems to be deleting it, honestly. Let's pull it up significantly, give ourselves some extra room. Is that maintaining? I mean, a little bit, but this gets pretty pinched, and the pyro does not do an amazing job of colliding. Like the resolution of the collisions is not amazing. Like the pyro clouds might be a little bit large, so it can't fit in this relatively thin space. Like that's doing an okay job now, so we are forcing it to punch through. If we visually turn that off, like yeah, maybe. So let's make another thing that they tweaked. They made the rotation work better with pyro. So let's create a rotation. Honestly, we might not even need to change anything. If I hit play, hopefully we can get some rotation happening. Thought we'd see something right away. Maybe it needs to be stronger. Okay, yeah, something's going on. Oh, it's happening on Z. So maybe that needs to be pointing up. There we go. Whoosh. That's cool. Okay, let's calm back down again. Whoosh. Okay, let's see what we get now. So we should get some rotation happening. Neat. Not exactly getting sucked into the vortex, though. Actually, what's funny is, like, while we're doing this, how many of the settings we're reaching for that are, like, new in this version. Because the next thing I want to do is actually crank up the noise effect. So as we're generating this pyro, we've got the noise, the C4D noise. So we get all these settings. So I'm going to say crank up the contrast there. And let's crank up the scale a bit more. And actually, we'll use Luca, which is great for smoke. Yeah, so, yeah, instant kind of like cloud-esque effect. Maybe not quite as much contrast. Yeah, so yeah, like a nice varied pattern there. And, maybe the default scale was fine. What do we want to do? Should we crank up the initial density again? I mean, there's a lot of density. It's going to start getting, like, really dark. Interestingly, it almost feels like they're not all moving. Now, rotationally speaking, I don't know if this is, like, pushing things outside too much. Like, maybe things are getting flung out. But we're definitely not getting any sort of, like, attraction towards the center. Definitely not that we'd want to push down. I think there's a lot of additional effects that we might want to be doing here. Like, instead of this secondary collider that was above, this one, I'm just going to turn those off. And as an alternative, let's make a wind. Simulate force wind. And aim that downward. So we just got wind that's going to be blowing down everywhere all the time. I just want to see what that does. Not even doing anything else. Like, as it makes this pit, is that going to feel like it's blowing down that hole? Yeah, actually, I like that. I like that better than what we were getting with the double. The double plane kind of squishing it in. Now, are we being a little bit silly here? Should we? Maybe pyro should be generating from the deforming geometry, and it should be constantly spitting out some density. Like, would that be a good idea? Like, let's turn off our removal of it. Let's say that we're constantly adding density, and let's go back to it being able to fade out. So I'll set our dissipation back up. So now we're constantly spewing out new smoke, but it's also going to fade away pretty quick. That's interesting. I guess it might. Oh, it's a collider, but it's generating on both sides of it. So maybe we do want 2 swirls, but one is a collider, the other's the generator, and then one can scoot down a little bit. So we're not sandwiching it in between 2. One is making it, the other is colliding it. Yeah, it seems a little better. Definitely falls in the pit. Pretty heavy density. But the shape goes down. Give it, I still feel like there's some sort of like initial like vortex variation. But yeah, we're starting to get something there. Takes a little bit to get going, but once it does, we can definitely see it. What are some things? I think no friction, no bounce. The stuff fades away pretty quickly. We could probably crank up how quickly. But having this initial velocity is not a bad idea. The rotation ends up being like way too quick. Drop that down to 5. Seeing the pattern quite a bit. Let's add some vorticity back in again. Just turn vorticity on. Any kind of fall offs, I think, do add a significant amount of slowdown. Give that a second. I shall just for... I'm going to crank up the contrast here. So now Luca is appearing in some places and not others. Give it a little bit of animation speed so that can change over time. Oop, that's not percentage, so that animation speed should be 0.5 maybe. Bigger. Contrastier. Okay, we definitely feel that moving around now. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what I want to get vortex-wise. I see Justin is saying that you were less focused on the smoke part, but that, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, everything we saw there was like a smoke or particle effect. If I wanted to like get the effect of like individual tendrils going down, which is effectively what I want, probably goes to that's why I thought maybe cranking up this noise contrast. Like that looks really cool there. I feel like once it gets going, it's not working as well as I would want it to. Let's see what happens if we put a big old fall off in there. I'll try a cylindrical fall off. Which should have maximum fall off, bigger radius. So yeah, it's pretty much not doing anything on the outside. It should be doing a lot on the inside. And actually, let's grab the inner, give it, you know, some power up to there. And then we can give it like, I wish there's an individual height here because I often want this radial fall off, but you can do it just by like really cranking up this height. So now essentially there's no vertical equivalent to the fall off. So let's see. Actually, and then what I might like is if we're trapping this in the box, as that pillar goes way down, and maybe we should make that bigger. Actually, it's almost doing what I wanted already. But if we take our destructor and we just move that up a little bit, then as the smoke like falls down to the bottom of the pit, it will just get deleted. Let's see. Increasing the resolution could be good, but it will kill our frames. We've got substeps, we've got iterations. The main thing we want is voxel size. So if we drop that to 4, you gotta keep in mind small changes of that are much slower. But yeah, even at 4, I can see an improvement on that resolution. But once, you know, it takes a little bit for everything to get moving. Like I said, like just general motion seems to be additive. And I don't know if there's a setting where you can kind of make everything not care about the other ones. With the fall off on our rotation, I'm feeling like we should make it a little bit stronger. Double it. Really want to feel the rotation in the center. My general philosophy is go too far and then pull back if it's too much. Slow down our turbulence. 0.1. So yeah, these clouds can slowly move over time, but they won't be constantly like zipping all over the place. Not bad. We've got a reasonable resolution. It's definitely got a rotational vibe, and it's definitely falling down into the pit. I'm not sure why, like when I rotate my screen, it's still playing, but you can see as soon as I let go, suddenly there's a very different look to it. I'm not sure what the cause of that is. Yeah, there's a lot of variables going on here. I'm just not sure what is we're getting this really rough patterning there. I'd love for that not to be the case. But if I just weakened the downward wind, and that didn't help this, but now definitely it doesn't feel like it's going down quite as much. So I'll pull that back up a little bit. And I think that's the generation of the new stuff. It'd be nice if we could have it fade in, but that's not a thing. I wonder if we're adding too much still. Yeah, I'm still learning and getting an intuition for the way these things work. It's colliding with a mesh. We could go into our pyro and we got our field force sampling. I think that's fine. Force sampling, I'm gonna crank that up. This is like quadratic, I think, or maybe not quadratic's not the right word, but each time you increase it's like a subdivision surface where it chops it in half and makes it 4 times as complicated. So going from 2 to 4 is like quite a bit more resolution. But then we've got our, how do we do our collisions? I think there's a couple of settings for making collisions a little bit better. Smoothing, yeah, we're not smoothing out smoke. I don't think the padding does anything. If things are moving really fast, the padding could be important. These things are moving quickly, but I don't know if it's too fast. It could just end up being that we want a higher resolution. Maybe what's bothering me here about like the steppiness of that might just straight up be our overall voxel size. I mean, like that little bit of a swirl traveling down, it's not too bad. I'm not sure where to go a ton. Let's make our buoyancy 0. We'll just let the wind do its thing. See what happens there. That was a strong buoyancy. Seemed important, actually. Maybe this wind wasn't doing as much as I thought. That's where you got to do things in isolation. Like how much of this is actually pushing it down. Seems okay. Yeah, I'm just playing around now. Maybe this isn't the best use of our time. We can add a substep in. See if that has any effect on the stripiness there. Let's add another substep. There's a thing where it's like there's substep. I need to learn this because there's substeps inside the individual emitter, but then there's also like the global substeps, and I'm not sure if one is subservient to the other. Like if I add one substep there, ooh, I can't tell for sure, but that seemed like it looked better. Let's do 2 substeps. Maybe it was just there's a higher contrast. The higher contrast areas are maybe what's showing the stepping. I mean, does anybody have any follow-ups to this? Otherwise, we'll move on to another question. And then I guess Justin was saying, yeah, you were talking more about like, yeah, like Voronoi fracturing a sphere. And that could actually be a decent follow-up. It's very different than what that original image looked like. Or the way I would approach it. I did make a tornado in my original testing files. That's not what we've got here, but I would kind of like to try that again with some of the new settings working better But yeah, some of the collisions aren't not super happy with it, but you know, some of the end result looks pretty good here in the viewport. But I want to play more, you know, and really have it defined like what we're trying to create. Actually, yeah, just seeing somebody say, I will try making the voxel smaller again. So let's get rid of those sub steps. And let's just try going voxel wise. I imagine this will go significantly slower. But let's just see the way that looks. If it starts getting too slow, I'll kill it. Yeah, I mean, cranking up your voxels is always just going to make things look better across the board. And you can still see the steppiness, but it feels like a smaller steppiness. And yeah, look at the structures we're getting here. Like, that's why, like, the Luca, like, look how good Luca starts looking, especially at this higher resolution. Like, that's just gorgeous. Yeah, there's some pretty good structures there. Like, that's cool. Smoky kind of vortex. At this point, it feels like we need more rotation going on, but maybe it also just hasn't gotten up to speed. We also have to keep in mind the time or the frames that we're throwing at it. If we, I mean, what I maybe should have been doing here all along is sending this out to our viewport. Don't say viewport renderer, copy effects from viewport. I don't know if they look any good, but sending this out, constantly sending this out to our viewport. Output all frames. Constantly sending out to the viewport's a really great way of doing stuff with Pyro and even just simulation in general, because we can send this out. Oh, here's an important thing. You see how it's looking terrible here? For some reason in the viewport renderer, it's showing this as like a volume. So if you just tell your Pyro output to not render, then that should look way better. Yeah. But this will take the same amount of time as the viewport takes to play, but then we can play it backward and scrub around. It's all dependent on how much RAM I've got, especially while live streaming is dangerous, but you know, how many frames this can hold. Yeah, see what the already the rotation looks better here. You got to remember, you know, that we were viewing it at 2 frames a second, so this is going to be 15 times faster. And I definitely feel the rotation. I still think maybe the downward motion, I'd cut that in half. Yeah. Yeah. But kind of making these instant clouds is pretty cool. I haven't experimented too much with it, but I wonder how nice you could do like some time-lapse clouds doing like just a Luca noise. Anyway, I'll just start one more effect here. I'm going to drop the wind to a little bit less than half, and I'm going to increase the angle speed by, you know, kind of half again. Let's see what we got there. Yeah, I kind of feel like maybe we'll go even a little bit further down on the wind. Send that out, and then maybe we'll try a quick Voronoi fracture of what you were talking about. Darren, thanks for answering some questions in the chat. Rope emitting pyro for tendrils. That's not a bad idea, Darren. Like if we had an array of lines and then we had all the same forces applied, and you just have some essentially spline tentacles flapping around, and if those kind of got sucked into the vortex, you could have those individual splines emitting the pyro, so you kind of have like distinct tendril spots that were emitting it. It's hard to tell, but just frame by frame here, like I like this rotational motion a lot more, and you can see it is falling down into the pit. Yeah, that's better. The you can see the pyro is still fading out relatively quickly, so maybe I would want to drop that. I lowered it, but maybe we want those to live longer, so that like these tendrils could fall down. I know they're going to be getting separated as they go down, but that could be a major effect as well. I guess I didn't drop them too much, but let's say that they're going to live 7 times as long. I guess the absolute is important. Oh, in my head I was always like, what's the point of this absolute density dissipation? But I think that makes sense, because relative density dissipation means if something is really dense, it's going to fade away quicker. And eventually it's going to get so thin you wouldn't see it. That's not bad, though. It's definitely getting vortexy. I'm not surprised, but it is interesting that the pyro takes a little bit of time to get going. Darren, if you know, if that is kind of the concept of like vorticity, even though me turning it off didn't seem to have much effect, but it's like once some of that stuff is moving in a direction, essentially like the vector field of the directions, it takes a little bit for that to get going. And once it gets going, then it keeps going really well. But is that vorticity? And I don't think there's any way of like stopping it. Even there it says source none, so I wonder if there is still no vorticity, so maybe I'm thinking of it incorrectly. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, that looks cool. Yeah, we have the smoke living longer now, so we probably need to lower the density, because, you know, where it starts getting black, like it's just so dense that there's not much going on. It just becomes black. But yeah, these living a little bit longer looks cool. But anyway, that's that. Salam. Yeah, we had crazy weather in the last day in Chicago. We jumped up like 35 degrees in one day. And we had some weird lightning yesterday. Very angry sounding thunder that I've never heard before. If we wanted to do a relatively simple Voronoi fracture effect, so essentially going back to that original reference, saying we want to fracture this up and have it sort of collapse its way outward, how would I want to do that? Let's make a thin shell, which is easier than ever. I guess the Voronoi might be able to do that by itself, but let's do it with a new thicken. So we'll say thicken. There's a bit of thickness on this now. Now I throw that into a MoGraph Voronoi fracture, so that breaks it all apart. And we're going to need pretty tiny points, and honestly, we kind of need them everywhere. And they can't get bigger. Your intuition might be that it's like, oh, we can get bigger as we go out from the center, but any place that's actually going to have this stuff applied, and even here, like I'd want there to be like, well, I'd like there to be like 10 times more than there currently is. I wonder if we could do this with a simple way of doing this with a spline, which I'm kind of a fan of. Let's say that we don't colorize the fragments. We could offset the fragments. Like just so we can actually see where the cracks are. But if we run this instead of doing like a simulation, which maybe we can do both. But anyway, I think there might be a simple method to do here. How do I want to do it? I guess the simplest way is not a bad idea. So I'm just going to draw a spline. You see, I'm essentially drawing it from the top to what would be the center. And I did that just so I could see it. Now I can zero that out on X and scale it down. Make it exactly 100. Okay, cool. So there's just a line going from there to the center effectively. So Voronoi fracture, I would like it to be fed a spline. Spline. Based on a fall off. To reference that spline, the fall off can be a simple spherical field. Move that up here. Large fall off. Okay, so here's my basic idea. As this expands, it is seeing each piece, and then suddenly it's jumping to the line. Now it's snapping in kind of ugly, but we've got the fall off modifier. So as I increase that, we can transition into the effect. I'm not sure how much we want. So now, as I increase this, it's kind of, it almost looks like there's a piece in the middle that's not being affected, which is weird. Maybe its center point's probably just further than it looks. How thick are these pieces? I think it's a lot thicker than I wanted it to be. 2. Oh, the thicken. The Voronoi isn't acknowledging the thicken the way I wanted it to, which is something we've dealt with before. Remember, I've done things where I wanted the there to be like a shell, and the Voronoi stops that from happening if it's an object with a shell. So yeah, let's keep that in mind. I'm gonna say hull only, and it's gonna get us closer to what I wanted, and it should run a little bit quicker. We also say hull only with thickness. But anyway, you now see that as I increase this, we have individual pieces, and they're getting pulled into the center, and then they get pulled downward. So as essentially the mapping from 0 to 100 is how far along that spline they should be. So as these get pulled in, they get pulled down. So we're getting the overall effect. Now, at the same time, the spline could be getting animated to be pulling in. That would work. We can tell the spline modifier to, parameter-wise, don't affect rotation. So now we're just pulling in. So let's just get pulled in. And then make a random. And that random... yeah, position could be good as well. Little random position, lots of random rotation. And it's also going to have that same spherical fall off. So now as this goes, the pieces get pulled in, randomly spinning, getting pulled down. We can have them scaling down as they go. The everything's getting pulled to the beginning. Trying to think of the way. I don't think there's any way of getting a better fall off, because each has to be its own effector. But yeah, it's kind of doing the effect I was looking for. Because we're just doing a shell, are we safe to crank this number up a bit? The rotation is very quick in the beginning. You see how it's like starts flipping very quickly. If we go into the random, which is also being the spherical field, fed the spherical field, we can't modify that because it modify both. But we could say create a curve. Now I can say remap that. So it's going to ease into that rotation. So that same spherical field is being reinterpreted. So now you can see as the pieces get, yeah, look, that looks way better. See how this piece gets pulled away? It's not like instantly flipping. It slowly fades into that rotation. Yeah, that looks so much better. It's amazing what just a little curve will do. We can go back in and add some of that hull thickness. Yeah. And I mean, you can, imagine making a shell, the surface of a planet, and then making a second Voronoi on the inside. That can be more of like the chunks going on. All of these as they travel along this spline, even just being fed through this entire system, I could say, hey, linear or a plane effector, scale, uniform, absolutely in a -1 field, spherical field, and this one, like, oh, it's colorizing as well. Let's turn that off. So those are shrinking constantly as they go. But now I'll remap it again, but I'll remap it kind of the opposite, where actually, no, I think I'll do the exact same thing, where it's going to take a long time. It's going to really fade in the scaling, but as we get near the end of the fall off, they're going to be super shrinking down. So like as they end up along that spline, they should essentially be disappearing. Although this inner fall off would have to be scaling as well. Maybe I would be better off changing this overall size here. Yeah, instead of grabbing the outer spout. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, these are getting pulled in. Whee! Wonder how far. Oh, that's interesting. Plane effector. Plane effector has to happen first. Yeah, the order of operation super matters here. So in my Voronoi fracture, the plane should be happening first. Yeah, there. That'll help with the scaling. Yeah, we need that to be animating very slowly. I'm gonna go overboard. Wah. Oop. No, there goes Vulcan. Yeah, still, the transition time here is really quick, so you'd have to go really slow. But of course, even in that shot, like we're only seeing like a little bit happen. Is there a way? I can't think of an easy way of getting like some rotation in there. I mean and even the way the spline is moving, I'd want to be animating the spline, as mentioned earlier. I mean, honestly, even this, maybe we could have done it universally, because now I'm going to put that same curve here. So when the pieces start drifting in, they're going to be a little bit slower. The rotation's happening. Oh, yeah, the rotation happens over the course. Yeah, we just need to calm down that rotation. 90, 90, 90. When we get to around here, the motion's pretty good. And if I had the spline, the actual spline, in the most basic form, we just keyframe Y. So even here at the beginning, I feel like I want that to be up a bit, like that. And then as we continue through, like around here, like that spline should be like way further down, like that. So just a couple keyframes on that will really affect the motion. I just did a really sloppy job on it, but hopefully we can see that the chunks will move a little bit nicer. Yeah, so there's going to be more of a vibe of them getting pulled to a center point. And then on this type of thing, like you can end up with like some relatively rough motion in the beginning. You see these transitions are a little bit sloppy. So as a general rule, you could avoid that by being really careful with like your keyframes. But we could probably get away with that by using our old friend of the delay. So that will be happening. This will be the last thing calculating. And it's currently affecting the position, scale, and rotation. So you can see instantly, like everybody, well, I mean, at least me, I always reach directly for the spring. But actually blend is really powerful where it calms down those transitions. It takes longer for a shape to morph from one side to another. So I almost feel like we want to crank up that rotation again. Might be too much, but let's see. Yeah, it's the transition's too small. A little more transition time will, but it'll affect everything. So maybe everything needed a slightly different transition time. Yeah, we could just keep on playing and playing and playing forever. But yeah, that's a pretty good cracking effect, generally speaking. I mean, there's a lot of things that would like go a long way here. Like right now, everything is getting affected equally as the fall off passes through. Something that would be huge would be if, let's see, let's make a group field. Spherical will be in the group field, and all of these get, the spherical field gets replaced with the group field. Now we can make changes to all of them. Every time I don't use a group field, I'm always like, I should have used a group field. It's not hard to add it in, but Okay, group field. Get the spherical field there. Okay, so now we're back. Everything's working, but now that's falling through. But I could say, but then there's also a random field, and the random field is going to be Perlin noise based. It's going to be really big, and it's going to be overlaying. And we might want to duplicate that a few times or crank up the contrast. But already we can see a little bit of a pattern. Oh, let me turn off the delay because that's going to be stopping us from seeing the updates. You see as I change this how everything's wiggling around a little bit. Now if we just do the cheap way and say duplicate and duplicate and duplicate, then it's applying again and again and again. It's all the same random field. So as I change one, you can see. So I'm taking what is this essentially 0 to 1 fall off and overlaying that noise so you can see a pattern start to emerge in it. And just duplicating a bunch of times is an equivalent of, because overlay is kind of a weak effect, so it's kind of a strong way of applying a contrast to it. And I've never found a really great way of getting around that, but just by doing that, let's see if our pattern gets broken up a little bit. Yeah, like just adding a little imperfection on the edge so everything doesn't fall in exactly the same way. You gotta be careful about where you do it because you see like that chunk got super left behind just because of the shape of the Perlin noise. And every one of those is adding like more contrast in. And we could crank the contrast up more, but I don't know if that super effects overlays does it. Let's find out. Remapping as a curve. This is just like doing a curve modifier, but it's directly inside of the noise. So if we really crank that, that's some pretty heavy contrast now. But is it the same effect? And I don't think it is. Like it will feel it a bit, but I don't think it's going to be like as much as what I did. Yeah, not quite as much, but you could always crank up the contrast further. And does that get you there? I don't know. Yeah, maybe sort of. I do feel like they're a little bit different. But let's turn the delay back on again, get that transition going. And I think that's as far as we'll push this one. Well, I guess we got about 5 minutes left, so that's not enough time to really start a new one. Although, let's see if there's any questions. Oh yeah, that's not a bad idea. Justin's mentioning now we could put a pyro on there, which I think would totally work. Well, you'd want to do it once they're moving. There's actually things we could do there because you could apply a vertex map and say that potentially that things are being emitted based on where they are. We could make a MoGraph selection tag, possibly a MoGraph weight tag, have the same spherical or the same group field passing through that. And so based on how fast they're moving would be how much pyro is coming out. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that does work. That's running relatively well. Let's go 3 times as many pieces. And then keep in mind, we could very easily turn on simulation, the bullet simulation stuff here, and these pieces could be colliding with each other as they go down, following this motion based on the amount of follow position, follow rotation that you've turned on. I guess with a couple minutes left, I will save this as another version. Let's see if we can throw pyro on there. We should probably have way fewer chunks for that test though. So let's just do like 500. The delay effector is causing that to be out of sync at the start. It's remembering the previous positions. We're not gonna see anything for a while. We can use more chunks than this, I think. Okay, so weight map, and then I don't know if it's gonna see the weight map or not, but it's a good test to see if it does. So what do we want? We want a MoGraph tag. MoGraph weight map, MoGraph selection, MoGraph weight map. I'm going to say weight map. Select the MoGraph weight map, use fields, use the group field. So as that goes through, yeah, is that working? Because you see some of them are turning orange. Are they all turning orange? Because I feel like they're not. Look, a bunch of them are red. So are they going, oh, they're going through and then possibly going out. So decay to 100%. So now if they get any color on them, they're going to get more. And now, yeah, as they go through, you see that they are getting some color applied. So that's a decay, but it would probably be a good idea to also throw a curve on here and pretty much say, like, as soon as you get any amount, you're going to suddenly shoot up to 100% because it's like it's on or it's off. So suddenly, as soon as this hits any of them, which, by the way, for our testing purposes, let's say that we're starting our animation here so we don't have 100 frames of nothing. Spherical field, keyframe where you currently are. Delete, select that keyframe, slide it on back. Okay. So we should see some motion pretty early, I thought. I guess the random's affecting it as well. Yeah, so that's going through, and the selection tag, yeah, they're getting applied. So, directly on that object, simulation, pyro, emitter, no temperature, lots of density. Density enabled. It does accept a density map, but that's a vertex map. Probably. So I don't know if it's going to accept a MoGraph weight map. Hitting play. Say default sphere. It might have crashed. It might be thinking. But in any case, it shouldn't. We can't do it if it's taking that long to do one frame. It might have frozen. I don't know if I'm frozen on the stream. If you can still hear me, put a message. I saved before we started that second version, so we didn't lose much. But I'm thinking it doesn't like MoGraph. Whoop, it did calculate. Wow. Okay, so it took a really long time to give us a first frame. It also appeared everywhere. This is a bad file to be. It's a bad file to do this test on. The test should be done on a much simpler scene. I'll delete that tag because it's a dangerous file to do that on. But if we just open up a new file and sphere size of 10, cloner, 2x2, right click, simulation, MoGraph, weight map, use fields, spherical field, move this here. Okay, so that should have 100% and everything else has 0. Adding a simulation pyro and hitting play. Everything has smoke. I haven't fed anything in yet. MoGraph selection or MoGraph weight map, hit play. Not different at all. Everything's still emitting. So that did nothing. But this is a density map. So adding a vertex map, rewind, adding a vertex map, and I'm going to say view the MoGraph weight map. It's saying nearest, and that is illuminated up to yellow. I think it's up to yellow. But that didn't transfer in. But so instead, we just feed our spherical field directly in. And you see that now has weights applied. So putting that inside of our density map, and let's keep in mind, I should turn temperature off so that that's applying. Now, that's the only one that made smoke. But we bypassed the vertex map, the MoGraph weight map, I think it's called, entirely, and we went right to vertex maps. The vertex maps are pretty good. They definitely, every time the vertex map updates, there's a significant calculation hiccup. This is still pretty large. I'm a little scared of going overboard. I'm gonna set the voxel up to 10. I know that this is not that big of a scene, but there's a lot of points, and I'm not sure how how the pyro is calculating on everything. Anyway, delete that. Simulation pyro, right click, other, vertex map. Vertex map is based off our group field. What am I? Something feels weird. There's like maybe just because pyro's there. There's a huge hiccup happening right now where I think this vertex map it's like the Voronoi fracture is having to refresh and then create the vertex map and then drag it in. So there's like a huge hiccup happening as I try and drag these in. So that's now got that group field. And you can see a little bit of glow up there inside of our pyro tag. No temperature. Yes, yes, vertex map. I'm not going to hit play in the scene file, but we will turn on a viewport renderer, all frames, copy effects from viewport, deselect everything, save as BCD. Yeah, no idea what will happen. Maybe I won't like it, but it's definitely safer sending to the picture viewer than just hitting play in the viewport. But yeah, we're gonna have to wrap up very soon. Let me just check the comments, see if there's anything. Thank you everybody for asking questions. Like I said, next week there probably won't be a stream, but that's because I'm prepping for what I hope is an awesome presentation for NAB. So that should be good. I gotta ask Max on because I want to post. It's gonna be a really good tutorial, so I'd love to post it on Rocket Lasso as well. Check in the chat, check in the chat. Can you color the pyro based on its velocity? I'm gonna say no. There's no setting inside of, essentially, could you do that in a vertex map? Could you move based on the speed of a sphere moving? Could you set a vertex map color? And I don't think that's a thing. I mean, there might be some hacky workarounds, but once you can feed that through a vertex map, you could now colorize it, remap it with a gradient, and then drive the color via that. It took a really long time to think about it, but it did create the pyro only at that one spot. So there's a good chance this would go through, but man, I'm not sure what part of the process here is taking a while, but it's taking a while. Windbush, thanks. Yeah, I like the lights. I switched. I was using it like a teal and yellow or something, but I like the red and blue way more. But anyway, I've got a meeting I'm going to have to get to soon, so I think we have to wrap this one up. Thank you so much, everybody, as always, for coming and hanging out for another episode. I couldn't and wouldn't do these if people didn't come in with interesting questions. And oftentimes the questions can evolve into a full tutorial, like all the origami stuff is going to. Thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out. As mentioned, if you got a free Prime, or if you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you can give me a free Twitch subscription, which is a great way of supporting. But of course, the main thing we have is plugins. So if you buy a Rocket Lasso plugin that helps you complete a client project, then it helps you and it helps us. So anyway, thank you so much for all the support, everybody. I will be seeing you again in 2 weeks, hopefully in person at NAB. And if not, then online during my origami presentation. But for now, I think that's going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, everybody. And I'll see you in a week or two. Bye-bye.